Hello, dear listeners. In this part, we consider capital markets in two great nations, China and India. And let's start with China. And China equity market is relatively young. In the Shanghai and the Shenzhen stock exchanges opened up in December 1990. It was the integral part of Chairman Deng Xiaoping famed reform and opening up initiative. Growth has been swift in interim, however. As of October 2020, the total value of China's stock market has climbed up to the record high level of more than 10 trillion United States dollars. In addition to listing in mainland markets, the largest Chinese firms and state-owned enterprises also list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Although the Hong Kong Exchange is governed differently than the Shanghai and Shenzhen exchanges, these three are often grouped up together in the Great China category. Although mainland China two exchanges were developed around the same time, they serve very different functions. Shanghai Exchange has historically listed China's most prominent large-cap companies, state-owned enterprises, banks, and energy firms, sectors collectively known as Old China. Shenzhen, however, plays host to small and mid-cap private sector names. Moreover, the China Next market, which is the market of fast-growing technology firms, is also based in Shenzhen. Shanghai Stock Exchange is the dominant exchange by market capitalization, trading volume, and securities turnover. The Shanghai Exchange hosts a number of financial instruments, included among them A shares, B shares, open and closed-ended funds, warrants, T-bonds repos, and convertible bonds. The primary benchmark used to gauge exchange performance is SSE Composite Index. Shenzhen Stock Exchange consists of three main exchanges to serve companies of different sizes and maturation: the main board, the small and medium enterprise board, and China Next market. Products traded on Shanghai Stock Exchange include equities, bonds, and mutual funds. Within these categories, many sub-product lines are presented A shares, B shares, indices, open and closed-ended funds, fixed income products such as asset-backed securities, and derivatives such as warrants and repurchase agreements. In contrast to Shanghai Stock Exchange, several benchmarks are used to gauge Shenzhen performance. They include SZSE Component Index, SZSE 100 Index, 10 SME Index, and China Next Index. An additional level of complexity is inherent in China market structure, the presence of multiple share classes. And these classes afford different privileges depending on where the investor purchases the stock, where the listed company is incorporated, and the currency in which the stock is denominated. A-share class are companies incorporated in China and traded in Shanghai and Shenzhen, and quoted in yuans and mainly owned by domestic investors. The latter is explained of low accessibility of this market to international investors due to some restrictions which have only been eased in recent years. And foreign investors may invest in A-share via Stock Exchange Qualified Foreign Institutional Investor Initiative or RMB Qualified Foreign Institutional Investor Programs. Actually, I expect that China will continue to open its onshore markets to international investors. However, geopolitical issues may slow down this process. Let's consider other classes of shares. So let's start with B shares. These are shares of companies incorporated in China, which are traded in Shanghai in dollars and Shenzhen in Hong Kong's dollars. Before expansion of A-share market, B-share market were very popular with foreign investors. However, now they are much less utilized. And lastly, there are H-class shares, which represent the shares of publicly traded incorporated Chinese companies. And these shares are listed on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. H-share are issued in China under Chinese law and are subject to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange listing requirements. The rules state that annual accounts there must follow Hong Kong or international accounting standards. H-shares quote and trade with a face value of Hong Kong dollars, and H-shares are also open for all investors to trade. A key feature of Chinese market is the advanced volatility above that of mature equity markets. It is a market characterized by booms and busts, apparently unrelated to the country's overall economic performance. And one explanation is that China A-share markets are dominated by retail investors. And retail investors tend to have a shorter investment time horizon than institutional investors. They trade in and out of positions much more frequently. However, I expect that the greater presence of institutional and foreign investors will help to reduce this elevated volatility. Let's now consider India capital markets. And actually, India has 21 regional stock exchanges and 2 national level stock exchanges, which is Bombay Stock Exchange, BSE, and National Stock Exchange, NSE. And the Bombay Stock Exchange, based in Mumbai, is not only the oldest stock exchange in India, but also the oldest stock exchange in the entire continent of Asia. And the second major exchange is the National Stock Exchange. It's established in 1992, and the National Stock Exchange was the first to provide the modern, fully automated and screen-based electronic trading system. As of February 2020, the Bombay Stock Exchange had around 5,000 listed firms, whereas its rival, National Stock Exchange, had about 1,800 stocks. Out of all the listed firms on the Bombay Stock Exchange, only about 500 firms constitute more than 90% of the market capitalization. The rest of the crowds actually consist of highly illiquid shares. Almost all the significant firms in India are listed on the boards of the exchanges. The Bombay Stock Exchange is the oldest stock market, but the National Stock Exchange is the largest stock market in terms of volume. As such, National Stock Exchange is more liquid market. In terms of market capitalization, they are both very comparable at about 2.3 trillion United States dollars. Speaking about the benchmark, Sensex is the oldest market index for equities. It actually includes shares of 30 firms listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange, which represent about 47% of the index free float market capitalization. Let's go back to the China bond market. The China bonds market is ranked third globally in terms of size, and it's occupying around 95% of the GDP of the country. Market fragmentation is one of the features of China's bond market. And China's bond market is dominated by the interbank bond market or OTC market and supplemented by the exchange bond market. Due to lack of connectivity, submarkets are discrete. They are with different trading systems, market participants, and bond varieties. Accordingly, the regulatory framework is also fragmented there. This is reflected in multiple systems of regulation with different regulatory concepts, operation mechanisms, and regulatory styles on different trading flows by different regulators. Governmental institutions are the main issuers and commercial banks are the main holders of bonds in China. As for outstanding bonds, China bonds market is dominated by bonds issued by governmental institutions. This is about 57% of the total. But the share of credit bonds issued by the commercial financial institution and not financial corporation is increasing. As for investor structure, the market is commercial bank dominated. This is one of the main reasons for the insufficient liquidity of the secondary market and the main disadvantage, because we know that commercial banks are prone to holding bonds to the maturity. We will consider Chinese bond market in further details in the next lecture of this course. Let's go back to India. In India, bonds and money markets are the market which is dominated by government issues. We see bills from 14 days to 12 months, and 5, 2, and 20 years bonds are traded. The real sector of non-banking, non-financial companies has a very small dependence on bonds. And the real sector is heavily reliant on banking money. As a result, penetration of bond markets in India is only about 15% of the country's GDP. This is much lesser than that in several other countries, for example, 45% in the United States of America. The three features that distinguish Indian market from the world are: first, the predominance of the financial sector; second, the predominance of the private placement market; and the third, very significant share of mutual funds and insurance companies as bond investors. They represent about 50% of the market. And one of the major challenges faced by the Indian corporate debt market is that of inadequate liquidity and depth. The secondary market for corporate bonds are severely constrained by the lack of liquidity and transparency. Let's finally compare derivative markets between China and India. In China, derivative markets, traditionally, the focus has been on commodity derivatives. And the nation's three commodity futures exchanges are Shenzhou, Shanghai, and Dalian. In 2020, they reported turnover of around 60 trillion United States dollars. This turnover was fueled by actually rising risk hedging needs due to coronavirus. And the Shanghai Future Exchange operates key contracts for copper, aluminium, rubber, and fuel oil. And I expect that China will accelerate the rollout of new commodity futures and options, including natural gas, refined oil, and peanuts, as it sets out to develop its derivative markets amid increasing demand. And in addition, China continued to open its derivative market to outside worlds, making it easier for international investors to trade. For example, in 2020, Unified Qualified Foreign Investor Regime was introduced. It actually simplified and speed up the process through which international investors can apply for the license to access Chinese markets. It also expanded the category of products available for investors. In India, financial derivative trading is well established, with interest rate options, futures and swaps, mainly traded over the counter. And the main exchange are famous National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange. Actually, the Bombay Stock Exchange offers index futures and options on the Sensex index. Derivative instruments are available for stocks, currency, bonds, and commodities. The over-the-counter derivative markets in the country has grown significantly over the years. And additionally, the turnover of over-the-counter foreign exchange instruments grew from negligible in 1995 to $40 billion in 2019. In the same way, the turnover of over-the-counter interest rate derivative in India rose from negligible in 1995 to $5 billion in 2019. So, the financial markets in both China and India continue to grow. Indian markets are more mature and has a long history, but China financial markets have become stronger and stronger. In the next section, let's consider another important financial markets participant in these countries, the insurance industry. Please remain patient. I will be with you very shortly.